Hi, it's Mark Laughlin. This is my episode that I call Gun Mystics. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean by sort of a superstition as to just how effective a firearm is or how dangerous it is compared to everything else we do. Now, I want to kind of propose that we think about something that we do all the time as far as driving. Okay, we pass each other head on, inches apart on the highways in America. And think of this. A car traveling, say, at about 70 miles an hour, that is about 100 feet per second. Okay, now which would you rather be hit by? A chunk of lead out of this, say, traveling at 100 feet per second, versus getting hit by a car at 100 feet per second? Well, clearly, the car has a lot more ballistic energy than what a handgun or a rifle is going to have. There's a lot more mass behind that velocity. So let's step it up to get more closer to what really happens out of a gun barrel. Let's move it up to 300 feet per second. Even still, 300 feet per second, that is the speed that a paintball gun, what you want to keep it shooting under is 300 feet per second. And still, even if it was lead, I would still rather get hit by a bullet than hit by a car at 100 feet per second. Okay, let's think if it was 800 feet per second. So the approximate speed of a round coming out of a 45 1911. Now, 800 feet per second, it's getting a lot faster. It does, of course, cause injury from a handgun. But even still, I would rather be shot by a 45 at 800 feet per second than hit by a car moving at 100 feet per second, 1,200 feet per second, or let's go up to 2,500 feet per second. So we get into rifle velocities. And say we got a 168 grain bullet moving at 2,500 feet per second. Even then, now, I wouldn't want to be shot by a rifle at 2,500 feet per second. That's pretty close to being deadly. But getting hit by an automobile at only 100 feet per second is probably more deadly. In fact, I would not want to be getting hit by an automobile at even 50 feet per second or even 20 feet or 10 feet per second. There is so much mass, so much energy in an automobile. Now, let's carry this kind of further. As we typically think of when we're on the gun range, you do not move down range until the range is clear, both directions. You make sure the range is clear before you cross or go down range at a gun range. Now, and it makes sense. It makes perfect sense that you're cautious at the gun range. You don't get shot, but yet on a daily basis, I see Americans crossing the street with their heads down looking at their cell phones or got their earbuds on, and they don't even take the effort of looking both ways. They just trust the fact that they're walking on a crosswalk, that vehicle moving at, say, 20 or 30 feet per second with that enormous mass, that they're going to stop. If they don't, injury is certain. Now, of course, I talk about, as a pedestrian, being aware of the dangers, the ballistic dangers of an automobile when you're crossing the street. But you should also look at it as being, as a driver. Basically, it's like you're packing ballistic capacity by driving an automobile. And so you are responsible for the mass and velocity of that vehicle and the harm it may potentially cause to others if you do not take care. Now, one thing I found from motocross, what it taught me from 10 years of racing motocross, was you get the opportunity, unfortunately, many times to feel the difference between when you hit the ground at, say, 5 miles an hour versus when you hit the ground at 20 miles an hour or 40 miles an hour. As the velocity increases, it's like the impact field of the impact increases by a square. So it's to experience it physically is way different than just driving down the road. And you get accustomed to, you reach a certain speed and you become accustomed to it, and you kind of become unaware of it. And I think it's important to always maintain awareness of that. I often think that if I waggled my handgun around as recklessly as many people brandish their automobiles, I would be in jail. And so think of that, keep that in mind, both as a concealed or weapons carrier and as someone driving an automobile in modern America today. Now, before we move on to the next section, I want to think about there's this whole movie, emphasis on firearms, or the movie that kind of portrays firearms as being this instant kill. And you saw it, particularly even in the old days, in the old cowboy movies, when the villain got shot, he would just instantly double over and tumble over the railing into a watering trough, instantly dead. And quite clean too. And even our modern movies, even though they show the splatter, the blood splatter, and a certain gruesomeness of it, one thing they don't show is that quite often gunshot wounds leave a victim screaming in agony and writhing in pain. And those are the kinds of things you don't often see in these movies. I can't think of one where you see that. Only in real gunshot videos do you see that kind of thing. So there's not like this, a handgun or a rifle is this, this kryptonite bullet that just instantly vaporizes another human being. It does cause tremendous injury, and for that reason we must be careful, but we must not have this mystical view of the weapon, which is common, particularly amongst the liberals and those who are not familiar with firearms. Now I'll leave you with one little quote, and it's from one of my favorite TV series.
If someone ever tries to kill you, you try to kill them right back.
If someone tries to kill you, you kill them right back. So when the thing to remember as far as gun mysticism, one of the things to remember is these are not kryptonite weapons. These are they're just throwing rocks. It's nothing magical about them. They're just throwing a rock at a high speed. So don't count on them to be 100% effective. But also, a lot of people just when they get shot, they just collapse in because they believe this gun mysticism so desperately or so bad. They just believe that they just have been impacted by kryptonite, and they're going to perish or die instantly. If you do get shot, don't give up. It's a wound. Yeah, it may be life-threatening, but fortunately with modern medicine today, if you can win the gunfight and get yourself to medical care, you have a very good chance of surviving.